If you always agree with the crowd, even in good times, you're already preparing your downfall. Seneca. You were told to be nice, to be polite, to never upset the room. So you made yourself small to keep the peace, and now you wonder why no one sees you. Too many men confuse kindness with goodness and goodness with silence. You keep giving, but the more you give, the less you're respected. You say yes when your soul screams no. You stay quiet because you fear rejection. But what if your idea of being a good man is the very thing holding you back? This video is not about becoming cold, it's about becoming clear. You will learn why stopping being too nice is not rebellion, it's responsibility. Why people-pleasing isn't a virtue, it's a survival strategy you no longer need. And why Stoic masculinity isn't about dominance, it's about presence, principle, and power that doesn't beg for validation. You're not alone. Many strong men are silently drained, overlooked, overused, and emotionally exhausted, not because they lack value, but because they've given it away too freely. If that feels like you, this message is your turning point. It's time to unlearn the habit of disappearing to be accepted. It's time to draw the line, not in anger, but in dignity. Let's explore the Stoic path, where self-respect replaces approval, and where you stop performing and start existing. Stay with me. What's next may just change how you show up in the world. 1. Strength is not submission. You don't have to become cold to be respected, but you do have to stop being agreeable to be seen. That's the line most men were never taught to draw. From childhood, you were praised when you were polite, quiet, and helpful. You were told not to interrupt, not to argue, not to question authority, and so you learned early. To be a good person is to be soft, to not disturb, to shrink yourself for others' comfort. But as you grew into a man, that script didn't lead to respect. It led to invisibility. You've been taught that being good means being liked. But Stoicism says the opposite. Marcus Aurelius, both emperor and philosopher, ruled not because he was agreeable, but because he was grounded. He wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." But his life shows us what being one truly means. He wasn't submissive, he was steady. He didn't trade truth for approval. He stood firm in what he believed, even when it cost him comfort. This is what today's world has twisted. Men are told to be kind, but not taught how to be strong while doing it. So kindness turns into passivity, the agreement turns into silence, and that silence gets rewarded not with connection, but with dismissal. The moment you stop serving a purpose, you're replaced. Not because you were unkind, but because you lacked weight. Take Aaron, a respected manager in his team. Everyone liked him. He stayed late, covered for others, and rarely said no. But when layoffs came, his name was on the list. He wasn't confrontational, he never caused problems, but he also never stood up for himself. And in the end, they didn't choose who was kind, they chose who was irreplaceable. David wasn't. Seneca warned about this trap. If you always agree with the crowd, even in good times, you are already preparing your downfall. And today, that's exactly what's happening. You keep your head down. You say yes to what you don't believe in. You laugh at jokes that insult your values. You nod when you should speak, and still, you get overlooked. Why? Because you trained the world to believe your presence has no consequence. The Stoic does not confuse virtue with submission. He knows that goodness without strength is not noble, it's exploitable. Real virtue carries boundaries. It commands attention not by shouting, but by being unshakable. A man rooted in principle doesn't need to beg to be noticed. His presence is enough. So what do you do now? First, stop thinking being liked is the goal. Replace it with being aligned. Speak clearly, not constantly. Be kind, but don't surrender your voice. Don't say yes out of fear. Say yes because it's your will. And if it's not, stand still. Let silence speak louder than agreement. You were not meant to be everyone's comfort zone. You were meant to be a man with presence, with weight, with consequence. Stop walking into rooms trying to be liked. Walk in with your values intact, and let that be enough. Because if your goodness requires you to be stepped on, it isn't goodness. It's a quiet form of self-erasure, and there is no honor in that. 2. Kindness without boundaries is self-betrayal. You've been told that kindness is a virtue, that good men should be humble, agreeable, and patient. But no one warned you what happens when that kindness has no limits. When every yes chips away at your own truth. When being polite becomes a full-time performance. You've called it empathy, you've called it emotional maturity, but deep down it's not strength, it's fear. Fear of being disliked, fear of being seen as difficult. And in that fear, you've betrayed yourself quietly, one polite smile at a time. You weren't born to be pleasing, you were trained to be that way. Trained by the be nice corrections, the don't upset them warnings, the good boys don't raise their voices conditioning. Every time you lowered your tone to avoid conflict, every time you swallowed your opinion to keep harmony, a piece of your will, your prohairesis, as the Stoics called it, was handed over. What began as survival became a pattern that now defines how you show up in the world. You make room for everyone else, but there's never space for you. Picture this. You're in the room. Your boss asks you to take on more work again. You're exhausted. You want to say no, but your mouth moves before your mind can act. You nod, you agree, and inside a quiet resentment simmers, not toward him, but toward yourself. You drive home thinking, why can't I speak up? Why do I always fold? You tell yourself you're being kind, but that wasn't kindness. That was fear masquerading as virtue. Epictetus taught that if you say yes when your soul says no, you are not choosing, you're collapsing. Stoic philosophy doesn't honor obedience to fear. It honors reason, and reason demands boundaries. Marcus Aurelius didn't shape himself to others' expectations. He shaped himself according to nature, to reason, to clarity. He wrote, "If it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it." That applies not just to morality, but to your own life decisions. When you agree out of fear, you give people permission to disregard your limits. And over time, they do. They expect your silence, they expect your yes. They don't see a man, they see a function, a resource. And when you're no longer useful, they won't thank you. They'll replace you. There's nothing stoic about being liked by everyone. There's nothing admirable about constantly suppressing yourself for the comfort of others. Seneca warned us that false humility is the worst kind of self-harm because it parades as virtue while poisoning your integrity. Stoicism doesn't demand that you fight everyone, but it demands that you stop fighting yourself. So stop calling fear by a noble name. Stop wearing your inability to say no like a badge. Instead, start asking, is this choice aligned with my values, or am I just afraid of disappointing someone? That one question can shatter the illusion of goodness and lead you back to clarity. You are not here to be palatable. You're here to be principled. And real kindness, the Stoic kind, begins when you honor your voice without apology. Because a man who betrays himself to be accepted isn't being good. He's being erased. 3. Earn respect through presence, not pleasing. If you disappeared tomorrow, who would notice? That's a brutal question, but it reveals something most men avoid confronting. You've built your identity around being helpful, agreeable, and easy to work with. You say yes, stay late, avoid conflict, and do everything right. Yet somehow, you're still overlooked, still unheard, still unchosen. Why? Because you made the mistake of believing that being likable leads to being respected. It doesn't. In this world, attention is currency, but respect is weight. And you don't gain weight by bending. You gain it by anchoring yourself. When a man speaks clearly without over-explaining, when he walks into a room and doesn't chase approval, people feel it. Not because he's loud, not because he's aggressive, but because he doesn't flinch. And in a culture that rewards performance, that kind of grounded presence is rare and powerful. Imagine a mountain. It doesn't ask to be noticed, it doesn't shout for validation, it doesn't move with the weather. And yet, everything respects its place. That's what Stoic presence feels like. It's not about being loud, it's about being unmoved. Marcus Aurelius didn't rule by pleasing Rome, he ruled by principle. He faced betrayal, war, and disease, but never begged for approval. His strength was not his title. It was the silence he carried while still standing tall. He wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That line doesn't instruct you to perform. It commands you to embody. Epictetus, born a slave, gained respect not by force but through unwavering principle. His words carried weight because his life was aligned. His identity was not shaped by others, it was chosen through action. He reminded his students that people only believe what they perceive. And when what they see is a man who never sets boundaries, who avoids hard truths, who always plays it safe, they don't see virtue. They see softness. And softness, in a world ruled by results, gets discarded. The moment you base your worth on approval is the moment you start negotiating your dignity. That's why so many men today feel hollow despite being helpful. They've mistaken being agreeable for being valued. But value doesn't come from being easy. It comes from being intentional, being clear, being untouchable in your self-respect. The Stoics never told you to shout. They told you to be undeniable. There's a difference. One seeks permission, the other radiates purpose. If you want to earn respect, stop selling yourself through kindness and start embodying clarity. Stop explaining your every move. Stop managing everyone's comfort. Speak with less, move with certainty, and when needed, say no with no drama attached. Respect isn't given to the man who serves endlessly. It's given to the man who doesn't vanish when challenged. So stop asking to be liked. Start showing you exist, not through effort, but through principle, through stillness, through presence that doesn't chase the room, but grounds it. Because in the end, the man who's feared is often resented. The man who's loved is often used. But the man who is respected, he is left untouched, not because he intimidates, but because he does not move. And when you become that man, you never need to ask for respect again. You are it. 4. Stop being useful at your own expense. No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. Seneca. You've made yourself useful, reliable, always the one people count on. You fill in the gaps. You say yes when others hesitate. You smooth over conflict before it begins, and in doing so, you've built a reputation for being available. But what they see isn't your strength, it's your compliance. And the longer you stay in that role, the more they expect you to play it without question. Until one day you try to step back, and they look at you like you've broken a promise. That's the danger of being the good one. You become a tool, not a man. You train people to believe your time isn't yours. Your peace is theirs. And when you finally say no, not only are they surprised, they're disappointed. But you didn't change. You just stopped erasing yourself, and they never noticed until you refused to disappear. Take the story of James, a marketing manager who never missed a deadline, picked up extra work, and even ran meetings for his absent supervisor. His inbox was always open. His phone is never off. For years, this made him indispensable, until the company restructured and he wasn't even consulted. His reward for self-sacrifice? A severance email. Not because he failed, but because they never saw him as a leader. They saw him as support, replaceable, silent, safe. Stoicism warns against this illusion of virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. If your kindness makes you invisible, it's not strength. If your usefulness makes you disposable, it's not virtue. You are not a resource. You are not a backup plan. You are a person, a presence. And presence means setting limits. Being good without clarity is a trap. You keep giving until there's nothing left, and you mistake your depletion for purpose. But the truth is harsher. The more you give without boundaries, the more you're used. Not because others are cruel, but because you've trained them to be comfortable with your silence. And comfort without consequence becomes entitlement. Epictetus believed a man should never surrender his choice to others, not even in kindness. He didn't mean you must become selfish. He meant that when your actions are no longer guided by reason, but by the hope of approval, you've abandoned your stoic center. You've allowed your goodness to be managed by others' needs. And that's not virtue. That's quite desperation. Real stoic practice begins when you draw the line before exhaustion. When you say no, not in anger, but in alignment. When you stop picking up what others drop and let them feel the weight of their own responsibility. This isn't cold. It's clear. It's how you reclaim yourself without explanation. And when you live that way, people won't resent your boundaries. They'll respect the man who set them. So the next time you feel that impulse to say yes without thinking, pause. Ask yourself, is this helping or hiding? Is this generosity or fear of being unloved? Because every time you choose silence over self-respect, you vanish. And Stoicism is not the art of disappearing. It's the courage to exist fully, even if that means no longer being everyone's solution. 5. Don't trade your soul for acceptance. You can follow every rule, show up early, never raise your voice, and still be replaced without warning. Because acceptance isn't loyalty. It's conditional convenience. And when your identity depends on being accepted, you give others the power to define your worth. That's not kindness, that's surrender. Too many men live under an invisible contract. Keep the peace, avoid friction, stay agreeable, and in return, you'll be safe. But safe from what? From rejection? From judgment? Or from finally standing up and being seen for who you are instead of who they prefer you to be? When you shape your life around being accepted, you disappear piece by piece. Your preferences fade into silence. Your values are edited to fit the room. And eventually, your very presence becomes a performance. You become a mirror for others' comfort, never a reflection of your own truth. But there's a price for that costume, and it's your clarity. Because a man who can't say no isn't peaceful. He's in hiding. There was a time you spoke freely, acted on your instincts, and drew lines without guilt. But life taught you to negotiate with your integrity. One awkward moment after another, you started adjusting to avoid discomfort. And now you wonder why your voice feels foreign in your own mouth. Why don't you feel seen, even when you're surrounded? Why you feel drained after doing everything right? Epictetus warned that if you begin to value the approval of others more than your own judgment, you forfeit your autonomy. Not in one dramatic moment, but in the quiet, daily erosion of your will. Every time you say yes out of guilt, every time you let something slide to avoid tension, every time you mute your own instincts just to remain agreeable. These aren't small compromises. They're cuts to the root of who you are. Marcus Aurelius didn't ask to be loved. He asked to live with justice. His goal wasn't to please. His goal was to live in accordance with his reason. That's why he could rule an empire without letting it rule him. He never waited for the world to accept him before acting. He acted and let the world catch up or not. That's presence without apology. That's power without pretense. If your peace depends on being liked, then it's not peace, it's a trap. And the more you chase it, the more you lose yourself. That's why men who always try to be liked end up exhausted, bitter, and quietly resentful. They can't speak their truth because they've built an identity around being non-threatening. But Stoicism doesn't ask you to be passive, it asks you to be principled. And being principled means you will disappoint people. You will draw lines. You will walk away, not to harm, but to remain whole. You weren't made to be consumed. You were made to be centered. And if someone only values you when you say yes, then they never valued you. They valued your obedience. So stop begging to belong. Stop adjusting to be approved. Stand where you are. Speak when it matters. Say no when it protects you. Because the man who no longer trades his soul for acceptance becomes someone far more powerful, a man who respects himself more than he fears being misunderstood. 6. Let go of the need to be understood. You don't need to be understood by everyone. In fact, the moment you start honoring your truth, you won't be. And that's not failure, it's freedom. Because trying to explain yourself to those who benefit from your silence is not dialogue, it's surrender. And the longer you stay addicted to being understood, the more you delay becoming who you truly are. Most men stay stuck in this quiet conflict. They want to change, they want to say no, they want to set boundaries, but they hesitate. Not because they don't see the truth, but because they fear the backlash of becoming different, of no longer being the version of themselves that everyone found useful, soft, and agreeable. So they shrink again. They keep the peace again. They swallow the truth again, until one day they realize they've built their life around a mask, and no one even knows the man behind it. Imagine this. You've always been the one who says yes, who listens more than you speak, who forgives even when no apology comes. You've been the peacekeeper in your group, the dependable one at work, the safe one in relationships. And the day you say, "I'm not available," or "I disagree," people flinch. They say, "You've changed." But you haven't changed, you've returned. You've stopped abandoning yourself to be understood. And now, their discomfort becomes your liberation. Marcus Aurelius never sought to be understood. He sought to act with justice, reason, and integrity, no matter how the world responded. He knew the truth doesn't require applause. Epictetus taught that when you live according to your nature, you will inevitably face resistance from those who live according to expectation. That resistance isn't proof you're wrong. It's proof you've stopped performing. When you finally start setting boundaries, people will say you're difficult. When you begin to prioritize rest, they'll call you selfish. When you stop apologizing for who you are, they'll label you arrogant. But none of these reactions reflect you. They reflect what your silence used to give them. They're not reacting to your truth. They're reacting to the absence of your compliance. Stoicism teaches that inner peace doesn't come from being liked. It comes from living in alignment with your values. You don't need to be explained. You need to be embodied. And that embodiment starts when you let go of this urge to justify your evolution. You are not obligated to remain the version of yourself that others prefer. You're not required to keep playing small just because your strength makes someone else uncomfortable. Let them misunderstand you. Let them mislabel your clarity as coldness, because the man who chases universal understanding chases a ghost. But the man who stands rooted in principle, who speaks when it matters and stays silent when it doesn't, he doesn't need the room to applaud. He doesn't need to be understood. He needs to be true. So the next time you feel that pressure to over-explain your no, to soften your stance, to make others feel safe at the expense of your own truth, pause. That's the moment you choose who you really are, a man of reason, not reaction. And that man doesn't beg for understanding. He earns respect through stillness. 7. Self-respect is your true freedom. There's something powerful about the moment a man chooses himself, not out of pride, but out of clarity. When he finally stops bending for approval and starts standing for principle, the shift is subtle, but permanent. He speaks less, but his words carry weight. He smiles less, but his presence calms the room. He's no longer driven by the need to please. He's anchored by self-respect. And that is where real freedom begins. At first, it might feel unfamiliar, especially if you've lived most of your life being the good guy. The man who stays quiet so others feel comfortable. The one who says yes out of habit, not conviction. You've been applauded for your patience, praised for your kindness, and admired for being agreeable. But none of that admiration ever turned into respect. And deep down, you know why. Because you were never being respected, you were being tolerated. And what they tolerated was your disappearance. Real self-respect doesn't come from what others think of you. It comes from what you refuse to compromise, even when no one's watching. It's built in the moments you say no without guilt. In the moments you choose silence, not because you're scared, but because it's not worth your peace. In the moments you walk away, not because you're weak, but because staying would mean betraying yourself. Take the story of Daniel, a quiet man who always played the peacemaker in his family. He mediated every argument, absorbed every insult, and smiled through disrespect for years. They called him the glue, but he wasn't glue. He was a buffer. Until one day, after another long dinner of biting his tongue, he stood up, said nothing, and left. That night, for the first time, he didn't apologize, and he slept like a free man. Seneca warned that a life without adversity is a life untested. But what if the adversity is internal? What if the real test is whether you can stop trading your values for harmony? You can stop shrinking just to keep others comfortable. The Stoic answer is clear. Dignity demands friction. If no one pushes back when you draw a line, it means you haven't drawn one. You've just hinted. Marcus Aurelius never sought to be feared or adored. He sought to be just, to be firm in what he knew was right, regardless of the outcome. That's Stoic freedom, not the absence of conflict, but the refusal to be controlled by it. You can be calm without being compliant. You can be kind without being consumed. So here's what self-respect looks like in action. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop managing people's reactions to your truth. You stop apologizing for your clarity. And you stop chasing peace by sacrificing yourself. Because built on self-erasure isn't peace, it's paralysis. The man who respects himself commands a different kind of energy. Not loud, not dominant, just undeniable. People may not always like him, but they always feel him. And that's the man you were meant to be. Not the agreeable version they preferred, but the real version they were never ready for. And once you become that man, you don't need to chase freedom. You already are it. You were never meant to live your life seeking quiet approval. You were meant to stand tall, not in defiance, but in alignment. Throughout this video, we've uncovered a truth many men know but rarely speak. that trying too hard to be a good person often leads to self-erasure. You become agreeable, available, and invisible. And in that silence, you lose your presence. But Stoic philosophy offers a way back, not through rebellion, but through reason. Not through anger, but through discipline. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus never asked us to perform virtue for the world. They taught us to embody it. And true virtue demands that you hold your ground with clarity, protect your energy, and stop pleasing others at the cost of your own self-respect. Start today with one small shift. Say no when you mean it. Speak when something matters. Set emotional boundaries without guilt. Respect your time like it's your most valuable resource, because it is. And if you feel resistance, good. That means you're no longer available for manipulation. That means you're beginning to carry weight. You don't need to be harsh. You need to be honest. You don't need to be cold. You need to be calm. This is what Stoic masculinity looks like, anchored, focused, and untouchable in principle. It's not about being liked. It's about being real. So ask yourself, what would change in your life if you stopped trying to be good and started choosing to be grounded? Think about that. Reflect on it. And if this message spoke to your experience, share your thoughts below. Your story might be the exact mirror another man needs to stop hiding and start becoming.